It was a quiet afternoon on the outskirts of town. The sun cast long shadows across the empty streets, and the faint roar of motorcycles echoed in the distance. Steven Seagal, the legendary martial artist and action star, was enjoying a rare moment of calm. Clad in his signature leather jacket and sunglasses, he walked with the steady, unshakable confidence of a man who had seen and done it all. Most people would have passed by, assuming they were just in the presence of another ordinary pedestrian. But some didn't know who he was. A group of bikers, revving their engines nearby, noticed him immediately. They were a rowdy crew, the kind that liked to test strangers, especially those who seemed out of place. The leader, a tall man with a scar running down his cheek, exchanged a glance with the others. A silent understanding passed between them. "Let's have some fun." As Steven approached the corner, the bikers positioned themselves to block his path. One of them leaned against his bike and sneered. "Hey, old man, this ain't your street. You lost or something?" Steven didn't flinch. His eyes remained calm, scanning the group without a hint of fear. He adjusted his jacket and continued walking, his steps deliberate and unhurried. Most people would have ignored the taunts or taken another route, but not Steven Seagal. The bikers, sensing his composure, grew bolder. They started circling him, revving their engines louder, their laughter echoing through the street. The tension was palpable. A few pedestrians stopped and pulled out their phones, sensing something was about to happen. And then it happened. One biker stepped closer, testing the waters, clearly trying to provoke him. But Steven didn't respond with anger or words. He simply stopped, his presence commanding the space around him. His calm confidence was magnetic, and suddenly, the bikers realized they were dealing with someone who didn't react like anyone else. What happened next would shock everyone standing there, a bystander whispered. Cameras were rolling, phones were out, and the stage was set for a confrontation no one would ever forget. It was a quiet afternoon on the outskirts of town. The sun hung low in the sky, casting long, lazy shadows across the streets. A gentle breeze stirred dust and leaves, and the faint rumble of motorcycles echoed somewhere in the distance. Steven Seagal, the legendary martial artist, actor, and master of calm composure, was taking a rare walk. Clad in his signature black leather jacket and dark sunglasses, his presence alone commanded attention, even if no one nearby recognized him. His steps were deliberate, his posture unshakable, and his calm demeanor suggested a man who had faced more than most could imagine. Most people would have walked past, seeing nothing more than a man in casual attire. But this group of bikers, a rowdy crew known for their reckless stunts and loud personalities, noticed him instantly. They were gathered near a small parking lot, engines revving lightly, the scent of gasoline and burnt rubber hanging in the air. The leader, a tall man with a long scar running down his cheek, gave a sharp look at his companions. A silent agreement passed between them. "Let's see what this guy's made of." As Steven continued walking, the bikers began to position themselves along his path, creating a blockade of chrome and leather. One of them leaned casually against his motorcycle, smirking. "Hey, old man," he jeered, "this isn't your street. Lost or something?" Steven didn't flinch. His calm eyes scanned the group, assessing each one, but revealing nothing of his thoughts or intentions. He adjusted his jacket and continued forward, his steps confident and measured. Most people in his position would have either ignored the taunt or taken a different path to avoid confrontation. But Steven Seagal was not most people. The bikers, interpreting his silence as weakness or hesitation, grew bolder. Engines revved louder, tires squealed slightly against the asphalt, and laughter rolled through the air, a mix of bravado and challenge. The tension was palpable. Pedestrians walking nearby paused, sensing something unusual was about to unfold. Phones came out, cameras began recording. Instinctively, people knew this was no ordinary encounter. One biker, emboldened by the attention, stepped closer, trying to intimidate him physically. His stance was aggressive, chest out, jaw set. "Come on, show us what you got, Grandpa," he taunted, leaning in as if daring Steven to react. Steven didn't respond with anger, nor with words. He stopped for a single heartbeat, and in that stillness, his presence became palpable. It wasn't loud or aggressive. It was simply power distilled into calm, measured control. The air seemed to shift. Pedestrians murmured among themselves, whispering, Who is this guy? Phones continued recording, every eye fixed on the scene. The bikers exchanged uneasy glances. Something about him didn't feel ordinary. There was a quiet authority in the way he stood, a sense that he was completely in control without ever having to raise his voice or threaten. But their pride and recklessness blinded them. They didn't notice that they were already out of their depth. A nearby bystander leaned toward a friend and whispered, "That guy. He's not just some random pedestrian. You feel that? Something's off." Yet the bikers paid no mind. They were still caught in their own bravado, revving engines and circling him slowly. They thought the quiet man before them would eventually flinch, or at least respond in kind. But Steven Seagal's calm was not just composure. It was a warning in itself. His silent confidence said more than words ever could. Each small movement, adjusting his jacket, shifting his weight slightly, maintaining eye contact, carried a subtle authority that grew heavier with every second. The bikers, despite themselves, began to sense that this encounter might not go the way they imagined. What happened next shocked everyone standing there. A voice later recalled, echoing the tension in the air. Phones kept rolling. Cameras captured the moment. Every person in that street could feel the gravity building, and an unspoken truth began to dawn. They were about to witness something extraordinary. The stage was set. The bikers were ready to test him. Steven Seagal, calm, collected, and unshakable, was about to teach a lesson in a way only he could. Silent, precise, and unforgettable. The bikers were circling him now, engines growling like predators, tires scraping the asphalt with sudden bursts of noise. Each rev of the engine felt like a challenge thrown directly at him. Steven Seagal's calm did not waver. He continued walking slowly, every step deliberate, every movement measured. His presence was magnetic. He did not raise his voice, he did not shout, and yet somehow, the air itself seemed to bow to his command. One of the bikers, a younger man with a buzz cut and a leather vest adorned with patches, decided to push the limits. He swung his leg off the footrest of his bike and stepped forward, leaning slightly toward Seagal. "Hey, you think you can just walk through here without respect? Show us what you've got," he barked, his voice loud enough to echo down the empty street. Steven didn't flinch. He paused for a moment, looking the biker straight in the eye. That single look, calm, unwavering, and commanding, was enough to make the younger man hesitate. But pride would not allow him to back down. He motioned for the others to surround him more tightly. Engines roared louder, tires squealed, and the sound of laughter mixed with nervous tension. Pedestrians began to notice the escalating scene. Phones came out, cameras clicked, and whispers started spreading among the small crowd forming nearby. "You guys see this? That guy isn't reacting at all," someone muttered, nudging their friend. Another bystander added, "Something about him. He's not just any guy. You can feel it." The bikers ignored these warnings. They thought his calm was weakness, a pause before the inevitable. They had tested plenty of strangers before, and most had flinched or shouted back. But Steven Seagal was different. His measured stance, his relaxed breathing, and his complete lack of visible fear made the bikers feel, subconsciously, that they were stepping into dangerous territory. One biker, braver or more reckless than the rest, swung his arm as if to push Seagal aside. "Come on, old man. Don't just stand there," he shouted, his voice dripping with mockery. Steven simply shifted his weight slightly, and the man's arm froze mid-motion. The air around him seemed to tighten. In that moment, every person watching, whether standing on the sidewalk or recording on their phones, felt the weight of his presence. There was no aggression, yet an undeniable sense of authority and precision radiated from him. "Have you ever seen someone so calm under pressure?" A witness whispered to their friend, capturing the moment on their phone. "It's like he's controlling the room without saying a word." Meanwhile, the bikers continued circling, each rev of their engine trying to break his composure, each loud laugh meant to provoke. But nothing worked. Steven walked forward a few steps, deliberately slow, giving them just enough space to think they were in control. He did not engage verbally, he did not shout back. Yet with every step, he projected a quiet strength that unnerved even the bravest among them. A few bystanders edged closer, some snapping photos, others whispering among themselves. "He's not moving like he's scared." "Who is this guy?" one of them asked. Another said, "It's Steven Seagal, I think. The martial arts guy and actor." Even as the recognition began to spread, the bikers refused to take the hint. They were still caught in their own arrogance, convinced that this calm man would eventually react in anger or fear. But they were misjudging him completely. The tension had reached a boiling point. One biker, frustrated and desperate to assert dominance, revved his engine to the loudest pitch yet, tires spinning on the asphalt as he skidded slightly. "All right, enough games," he shouted, stepping off his bike, fists clenched, ready to provoke a reaction. Steven stopped walking. He turned slowly, facing the group fully, hands relaxed at his sides. His eyes were steady, his expression calm, yet there was a weight to his presence, a promise that he was in control of everything that was about to unfold. The crowd sensed it immediately. Phones were recording, whispers became audible, and the street seemed to hold its breath. If you were there watching this, what would you do? Step in to help, or watch from the sidelines? And tell us where you're watching from. Which city or country? Comment below. The bikers had intended to intimidate a stranger for fun, but instead, they were standing before a living legend, a man whose calm alone spoke louder than threats, engines, and laughter combined. The public watching could feel the shift. These bikers were no longer in control. Every movement Steven made projected the undeniable fact that he could handle any confrontation with precision and composure, without a single word of aggression. And in that moment, the crowd realized this was no ordinary encounter. Something extraordinary was about to happen, something they would all remember for the rest of their lives. The tension on the street had reached its peak. Engines roared and tires squealed, echoing against the buildings around them. The bikers, now fully confident in their numbers, closed in. They circled Steven Seagal like predators, each trying to assert dominance, each hoping the man before them would crack, yell, or flinch. One of the bikers, a tall, broad-shouldered man with tattoos crawling down his arms, stepped forward, fists clenched. "All right, old man. Show us what you've got. Don't just stand there acting like you're untouchable," he shouted. His voice was filled with bravado, but underneath, there was a hint of unease. Something about Steven's calm confidence was unsettling, even for a man who had seen his share of street fights. Steven remained silent. His eyes scanned the group, not with aggression, but with the quiet precision of someone assessing every movement, every micro-expression. He shifted slightly, and the air seemed to tighten. The bikers could feel it, even if they didn't understand why. Something was about to happen, and it wasn't going to be in their favor. "Come on, don't just stand there like a statue," another biker yelled, revving his engine, hoping the loud roar would provoke a reaction. But Steven didn't budge. He didn't flinch. He simply exuded an unshakable presence, a calm that radiated power. The crowd of bystanders, now more noticeable, whispered among themselves, their phones raised and cameras recording every second. "You see how calm he is?" one onlooker muttered. "You can feel he's controlling everything without saying a word." The lead biker, frustrated by Steven's unflinching demeanor, moved even closer. He wanted to assert physical dominance, to intimidate this seemingly ordinary man. "Step aside, or we'll move you," he growled, stepping toward him aggressively. Steven finally spoke, but his voice was soft, controlled, and cutting with authority. "You don't need to make threats to prove anything. Respect is earned, not taken." The biker froze, stunned by the calm confidence in his words. It was as if Steven's mere presence had shifted the energy of the street. The crowd leaned in, collectively holding their breath. Every phone in the air captured the moment, the sudden, subtle shift in power that nobody expected. A younger biker, trying to save face, lunged slightly toward him. In response, Steven moved with lightning precision, not with anger or force, but with the exact efficiency of someone trained in life-and-death combat. A single, measured motion, a step to the side, a redirect of force, and the biker stumbled, off balance, not injured, just reminded who was in control. The street erupted with gasps. Some bystanders whispered in awe, others cheered quietly, stunned at the skill and poise of a man who had just taken control without raising a hand aggressively. Even the bikers were momentarily silent, their arrogance faltering. You're not like anyone we've seen," one of the bikers muttered under his breath, realizing he had misjudged the man entirely. Seagal didn't respond to their words or their posturing. His calm had done all the work. The bikers had intended to provoke a reaction, but instead, they were experiencing the power of silent mastery. The crowd began murmuring, "Is this really Steven Seagal?" "Yeah, the martial arts legend. The guy in all those action movies." Recognition rippled through the spectators. Even as some bikers tried to regain their composure, the psychological edge had already shifted. If you were standing there watching this, would you have had the courage to face the bikers like Steven, or would you have walked away? Comment your answer below. One of the bikers, now desperate to assert dominance, swung his arm towards Seagal, trying to grab his jacket. But Steven simply sidestepped, using his opponent's momentum against him, gently but firmly. The biker stumbled again, tripping slightly on the pavement. No one was seriously hurt, yet the message was clear. The rest of the bikers froze. The bravado, the loud laughter, the confidence they had carried just moments ago, it was evaporating under the silent, calculated control of a master. They had come thinking this would be easy, a chance to intimidate some stranger. Instead, they were humbled, confronted not with anger, but with undeniable skill and calm authority. Bystanders began whispering excitedly, some filming every move. "Look at him. One move, and they're off balance." Another added, "That's a legend right there. The man doesn't even raise his voice, and he's in total control." Steven Seagal took a slow, deliberate step forward, not aggressive, not threatening, just commanding. The bikers instinctively stepped back, unsure how to react. The street, once filled with noise and chaos, now felt suspended in time. Every person there felt the intensity, the electricity of someone who had faced far more dangerous situations and had emerged unshaken. The tension reached a breaking point. A final biker attempted one last intimidation, a step forward, a jab of aggression. But Steven, calm as ever, met it with precision, redirecting their energy effortlessly. The lesson was clear. Arrogance and intimidation would not work. Respect had to be earned, and here, it had already been demonstrated. The bikers' faces betrayed shock and disbelief. Their plan to assert control had failed completely. The crowd, meanwhile, erupted quietly, in awe of what they had just witnessed. Phones continued recording, ready to capture the viral moment that was unfolding. This was the turning point, the moment when the bikers realized they were no longer in control, and the man they had underestimated had become the master of the situation. Steven Seagal's calm, his skill, and his presence had flipped the script entirely, and there was no going back. The street, once dominated by the revving engines and laughter of the bikers, had fallen into a tense silence. Every bystander could feel the subtle shift in power. The bikers, who had come to intimidate a stranger for sport, now stood frozen, glancing nervously at one another. Something about Steven Seagal was different, something that exuded authority without aggression. It started with a whisper from a young bystander, barely audible over the residual hum of idling motorcycles. "Wait, is that Steven Seagal?" The words spread like wildfire. One person whispered to their friend, who whispered to another, and soon the small crowd around them was buzzing. Phones were raised even higher, cameras capturing every angle, every subtle movement. Gasps, murmurs, and sudden recognition rippled through the spectators. No way, it really is him. Steven Seagal? The martial arts legend. The atmosphere shifted. The bikers, still caught in their arrogance, didn't immediately understand the gravity of the situation. Their eyes darted among the crowd, noticing the sudden change in murmurs and glances, sensing something they hadn't anticipated. Steven Seagal, of course, remained calm. He did not smile, did not boast, did not make a grand declaration of his identity. His quiet demeanor, already commanding respect, now carried an unspoken weight of authority and experience. He didn't need to say anything. The crowd's recognition did the talking for him. One of the younger bikers finally caught on. He glanced at the whispers, then at Steven, then back at the gathering crowd. "No, it can't be," he muttered, disbelief written across his face. The bravado that had fueled them just moments ago began to crumble. The realization hit. They were not facing just any man. They were facing a living legend, someone who had trained in martial arts for decades, someone whose calm was a weapon in itself. The crowd, sensing the bikers' confusion, began to cheer softly, then louder. Some people clapped, while others shouted encouragement. "Respect him. Don't mess with him. The energy shifted completely. What had started as a confrontation, with bikers trying to assert dominance, had transformed into a public acknowledgement of Seagal's presence, skill, and reputation. The lead biker, scarred and still stubborn, clenched his fists and tried to regain control. This doesn't change anything, he growled. But even he hesitated now, realizing the crowd was no longer on his side. Phones captured every reaction, documenting the reversal of power that had unfolded so quickly. Steven took a slow, deliberate step forward. His movements were calm, yet every person watching could feel the weight behind them. His presence radiated confidence, experience, and undeniable authority. The bikers instinctively backed up, unsure whether to continue their intimidation or retreat. Each one had now experienced firsthand the subtle mastery of someone who could neutralize their aggression without ever raising his voice. One bystander, braver than most, raised their phone and shouted, "He's not just calm, he's a master. Look at him." The crowd erupted into murmurs of agreement. The bikers were now visibly shaken. Their initial plan to dominate a stranger had failed entirely. They were the ones on the defensive, and they knew it. Steven, as always, did not gloat. He didn't need to. His calm had spoken volumes, demonstrating skill and authority that no words could ever match. The bikers, humbled and embarrassed, began to step back. The energy in the street had flipped completely. The ones who came to intimidate were now humbled before him. The recognition of his identity did more than just humble the bikers. It validated the silent tension that had been building since the first moment of confrontation. The crowd could now put a name to the presence that had dominated the street. The moment was electric. Phones recorded it all, whispers of Steven Seagal echoing across social media even before the day ended. Even as some bikers tried to recover their pride, the street was no longer theirs. The crowd had aligned instinctively with Steven, acknowledging the unmistakable mastery that emanated from his calm and deliberate actions. Every small movement, every glance, every step was a lesson in control, humility, and power. And yet, Steven did not relish it. He did not raise his voice or taunt the bikers. He simply remained standing, letting the recognition, the awe, and the respect of the crowd speak louder than any words he could have uttered. His silent dominance had turned a potential confrontation into a public demonstration of authority, skill, and calm mastery. The bikers' faces reflected shock, disbelief, and finally acceptance. They had underestimated him, and now they knew the consequences of misjudging someone by appearance or bravado. The crowd's excitement grew as they realized they were witnessing something extraordinary. A lesson in humility delivered effortlessly by a man who had mastered the art of presence itself. By the end of this moment, one thing was clear. The bikers had lost not just a confrontation, but the respect of the crowd. Steven Seagal had emerged unshaken, commanding, and fully in control. And all without raising his voice, without aggression, and without a single wasted movement. The street had shifted from a scene of confrontation to a stage of quiet tension. Bystanders were now fully aware of who they were watching. Steven Seagal, the legendary martial artist, actor, and master of calm authority. The bikers, who had once thought themselves in complete control, were now hesitant, glancing at each other nervously. Every engine rev, every laugh, had been neutralized by a man whose presence alone commanded respect. The lead biker, scarred and stubborn, clenched his fists, trying to salvage his pride. "All right, enough messing around," he shouted, attempting to reassert control. But his voice, once filled with confidence, now carried a trace of doubt. The crowd's whispers, their smartphones recording every second, reminded him that the tide had already turned. Steven remained silent, his eyes locked on the group with the steady focus of a predator assessing a situation. His body language was calm, yet commanding, a perfect blend of poise, readiness, and authority. He didn't flinch, he didn't raise his voice, and yet his presence spoke volumes. The crowd sensed it immediately. The balance of power had shifted completely. One of the bikers, younger and more reckless than the rest, took a step forward, attempting one last act of intimidation. He swung his arm aggressively, aiming to startle Seagal, perhaps to force him into a reaction. But Steven moved with precise, calculated efficiency. With a subtle pivot and a controlled push, he redirected the biker's momentum, causing him to stumble slightly, off balance but unharmed. The message was unmistakable. Any attempt at aggression would be met with skillful control. The street erupted in whispers and gasps. Phones continued recording, capturing every movement, every subtle shift in energy. The bikers were visibly shaken, their previous arrogance replaced with caution and disbelief. What had been a simple attempt to intimidate a stranger had become a public demonstration of mastery. Seagal's voice finally cut through the tension, calm but firm. You don't need to prove anything through threats or posturing. Respect is earned, not demanded. The simplicity of the statement, paired with his unwavering composure, was enough to silence the crowd and the bikers alike. For a moment, the only sound was the slight rustle of leaves and the distant hum of engines. The bikers, now fully aware they were outmatched, hesitated, unsure whether to continue or retreat. One bystander, phone still recording, shouted in awe, "Did you see that? He didn't even need to fight. Just one move and they're off balance." Another added, "That's a legend right there. He doesn't even raise his voice, and they're completely humbled." The lead biker, frustrated and desperate, lunged one final time, attempting to grab Seagal's jacket. With a single, controlled motion, Seagal redirected his momentum, guiding him harmlessly away. The biker stumbled, recovered, and froze, now fully aware that his intimidation tactics had failed. The crowd erupted in murmurs of admiration. Some clapped softly, while others cheered in excitement. "Respect," shouted one onlooker. "That's how you handle arrogance," whispered another. Every phone in the vicinity captured the moment, a perfect blend of tension, skill, and public vindication. Seagal didn't gloat. He didn't taunt. He simply stood, letting the situation resolve itself through his presence and subtle mastery. The bikers, humbled and embarrassed, began to step back, their confidence shattered. They realized that their recklessness had brought them face to face with a man whose calm, control, and skill transcended brute force. The shift in power was now complete. The bikers were no longer the aggressors. They were the humbled observers. The crowd, sensing the resolution, cheered louder, documenting every second for social media. The whispers of recognition spread. "This is Steven Seagal, the master." The energy in the street had flipped entirely. And yet, Steven remained composed. He did not seek attention or praise. His authority had been demonstrated without need for anger, without need for theatrics. Every movement, every glance, every word had reinforced a singular lesson. True strength comes from control, skill, and calm mastery, not from threats or aggression. For the bikers, the lesson was unforgettable. Their arrogance had been met with silent, undeniable authority. The crowd's recognition amplified the moment, cementing it as an experience no one present would ever forget. Steven Seagal had turned a potential confrontation into a powerful demonstration of respect, skill, and poise. If you think Steven Seagal handled this like a true master, type legend or respect in the comments below. Would you have the courage to face such a situation? The bikers slowly began to retreat, engines idling, faces flushed with embarrassment. The crowd's attention remained on Steven, recording every second. Even in their retreat, the bikers could feel the weight of the lesson, silent, precise, and unforgettable. In that moment, the street was no longer a battlefield of aggression. It had become a stage where a true master of martial arts had demonstrated what it means to command respect without anger, without violence, and without a single unnecessary word. Steven Seagal's calm mastery had turned a potentially dangerous encounter into a display of authority, humility, and skill. And as the crowd cheered and cameras continued rolling, one thing was clear. The bikers had underestimated the wrong man now. The entire street had transformed from a casual confrontation into a scene of awe and admiration. The bikers, once full of swagger and confidence, were visibly shaken. The crowd had begun whispering his name, pointing their phones, murmuring in disbelief. "That's Steven Seagal, the legend," someone said. Others gasped, recognizing the unmistakable presence of a martial arts master and Hollywood icon. Even the bikers themselves couldn't ignore it any longer. Their bravado, which had carried them through countless encounters with strangers, faltered. The leader, scarred and imposing moments ago, now looked at Seagal with a mixture of shock and disbelief. Every word of arrogance he had spoken, Every attempt to intimidate now seemed foolish. He glanced at the other bikers, silently asking if they all realized the truth. Their faces mirrored the same dawning horror. They had challenged a man whose calm mastery was legendary. Steven, as always, remained composed. He did not raise his voice. He did not gloat. His eyes scanned the bikers calmly, assessing them without anger, without pride. His presence alone spoke volumes, a living example of skill, discipline, and authority. The realization of his identity did not change his behavior. It only amplified the impact of his calm and measured dominance. One of the bikers finally muttered aloud, almost to himself, "It's really him. Steven Seagal." The group's energy shifted instantly. The confidence they had wielded moments ago had dissolved into embarrassment, unease, and respect. The crowd, sensing this shift, erupted into quiet cheers that quickly grew louder. Cameras captured every detail, every reaction, every subtle movement that spoke louder than words. The spectators' whispers became a chorus. "That's the guy from all the movies. Martial arts legend. The man doesn't even need to fight. Just his presence is enough." Seagal's calm demeanor had done more than neutralize the bikers' threats. It had commanded public recognition, admiration, and respect. The bikers were now humbled in front of a crowd that had shifted its allegiance entirely. What had started as an attempt to provoke and intimidate a stranger had become a public lesson in humility and control. The lead biker, still trying to salvage some shred of pride, attempted one last move, a subtle step forward, a defensive stance, perhaps to intimidate the crowd rather than Seagal himself. But Steven, with the precision and timing that decades of martial arts mastery had honed, shifted slightly, subtly redirecting the biker's energy without any aggression. The biker stumbled slightly, off balance, and the lesson was cemented. He had misjudged who he was dealing with. Bystanders erupted in applause and cheers, their phones raised to capture every moment. Some shouted, "Respect him." Others simply watched in awe, witnessing firsthand the quiet authority of a true master. The bikers, now fully aware of the public attention, could feel their embarrassment amplified. Every recording, every whisper of Seagal's name, reminded them that they had underestimated the wrong man. A young bystander, excitement and disbelief in their voice, shouted to the crowd, "Do you see that? He didn't even fight aggressively, and they're humbled." Another added, "That's the difference between a master and amateurs. He commands respect without violence." The crowd's admiration wasn't just for the skill demonstrated, but for the humility and control that Seagal embodied. He had turned potential aggression into a demonstration of authority and integrity, showing that true mastery isn't about dominance through force, but through calm, measured action. The bikers slowly began to retreat. Their engines idled quietly now, their previous bravado completely dismantled. Faces flushed with embarrassment, they realized the streets, and the public, had witnessed their humbling. They had come to assert dominance, but the lesson they received was public, unmistakable, and unforgettable. Meanwhile, the crowd continued recording, cheering, and commenting. The story was already going viral on social media, even before the bikers had fully left the street. Every camera captured not just the confrontation, but the subtle demonstration of respect, humility, and authority that had defined Seagal's handling of the encounter. Steven Seagal, as always, did not take the moment for himself. He didn't bask in the recognition or taunt the bikers further. His calm presence had delivered the lesson perfectly. The bikers' realization, the crowd's admiration, and the viral recordings were enough. The street had borne witness to a master at work, someone whose reputation, skill, and integrity transcended arrogance and intimidation. If you think Steven Seagal handled this situation like a true master, type legend or respect in the comments. Would you have the courage to face such a moment? By the time the last biker reluctantly moved away, the crowd had fully aligned with Steven Seagal. Phones continued recording, whispers of admiration continued spreading, and the aura of calm mastery lingered in the air. Every person present would remember this moment, a confrontation that transformed into a public lesson in respect, discipline, and quiet authority. The bikers had underestimated him. The crowd had recognized him. And in the end, it was clear, no amount of intimidation could overshadow true mastery, humility, and the power of calm authority. Steven Seagal had demonstrated, in a way that words alone could never capture, the meaning of respect and discipline. The street, once tense and chaotic, now thrummed with admiration. Every spectator carried with them a story of a confrontation, a legend, and the timeless lesson that true strength is measured not by aggression, but by calm mastery. By the time the last biker reluctantly left, the street had transformed completely. What began as a reckless attempt to intimidate a stranger had become a public spectacle, a story of respect, humility, and calm authority that no one present would ever forget. Phones continued to record, capturing every moment. The initial confrontation, the subtle display of mastery, the biker's embarrassment, and the crowd's growing admiration for Steven Seagal. Within minutes, videos began circulating online. Clips shared across social media showed Steven's calm movements, his precise handling of the aggressive bikers, and the moment the crowd realized exactly who they were witnessing. Comments flooded in, "Legend. Masterclass in humility. He didn't even need to fight aggressively. Wow." Within hours, the story was trending, shared by martial arts enthusiasts, movie fans, and ordinary people who marveled at the way one man's calm could humble a group of bullies. Meanwhile, the bikers were left to face the consequences of their reckless behavior. Locals, who had witnessed the confrontation firsthand, shared footage with authorities. The bikers had underestimated both the crowd and Steven Seagal himself. Their reputation had taken a hit, and the lesson was clear: arrogance and intimidation do not go unpunished, especially when met with mastery and calm authority. For the bystanders, the experience was unforgettable. Witnessing someone handle aggression with precision, control, and humility left a lasting impression. Parents shared the story with their children, friends tagged each other in videos, and martial arts communities analyzed every move, praising the efficiency and grace of a man who had faced far worse situations in his life. Steven, as always, remained composed. He didn't seek attention or validation. He didn't celebrate the biker's retreat. His calm had done all the work. The crowd's recognition, the viral footage, and the public admiration were simply a natural consequence of his mastery. Through his actions, he had demonstrated that true strength isn't about yelling, threatening, or dominating. It's about control, awareness, and dignity. As the story spread further online, millions of people commented and shared their admiration. Fans of action films celebrated seeing a real-life legend in action. Others praised his humility and discipline, pointing out that this encounter was a lesson in respect, not violence. The incident sparked discussions across social media about courage, composure, and how to handle conflict in a way that commands respect without aggression. Even news outlets picked up the story. Headlines highlighted the contrast: a group of reckless bikers attempting to intimidate a stranger, only to be humbled by one man's calm authority and skill. The public narrative was unanimous. Steven Seagal's actions were not only impressive but inspiring, showing the world that courage and mastery are measured in control, not chaos. The bikers, meanwhile, quietly retreated, humbled and embarrassed. The lesson was indelibly etched into their minds. Recklessness and intimidation meet their match when confronted by true mastery. They had challenged a man who did not react with anger, but with calm, precise, and undeniable authority, and they had paid the price for underestimating him. If you believe no one should be judged by bravado or appearances, type respect in the comments below. Share this story with someone who needs to see that calm mastery and dignity always win. Don't forget to subscribe for more incredible, inspiring stories like this one. As the crowd dispersed and the bikers left the scene, the impact lingered. Everyone present had witnessed a rare lesson in courage, humility, and control. Steven Seagal had turned a potentially dangerous situation into a living demonstration of mastery and respect, a lesson that resonated far beyond that single street. In the end, it wasn't about defeating the bikers with aggression or force. It was about commanding respect through composure, skill, and presence. The story went viral not just because of what happened, but because it reminded people everywhere that true strength is quiet, precise, and profoundly impactful. Steven Seagal had not only humbled the bikers, but he had inspired millions watching online. The story became a testament to the power of calm, the importance of respect, and the unforgettable impact of mastering yourself before confronting others. And as the videos continued to spread, one thing was clear: no arrogance, intimidation, or recklessness could ever stand against the quiet authority of a true master.